publicize your name. Make sure you maintain a respectful and positive communication. Any harmful, violent, or inappropriate comments will not be tolerated. In addition, we encourage you to bring your attention immediately if you have feedback on any behavior or situation that occurs during these sessions. You can do it by email, writing to Americas CES safeguarding@britishcouncil.org. Liliana, you can please post the email address where we are welcoming any kind of feedback around safeguarding, please, on the chat. We thank you all for your commitment to co-creating a safe and respectful environment for everyone. We're very pleased to welcome you to this space, and we hope you are all engaged and have a chance to participate. Now let's kick off with an overview of transnational education, our T&E, our understanding based on research, its importance in the context of global collaboration between universities. Over to you, Vera.
Thank you, Diana. And hello, everyone, once again. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be able to share a little bit about the research we've conducted in the region. Transnational education has become a very important topic for the British Council. It's a work that we've been developing in different regions, and we wanted to investigate and understand better the situation of both transnational education and understand a little bit the mutual recognition of qualifications status in the region. So the next slide, please. Yes. So we aim to understand a little bit what's the current situation, and understand as well the relationship between mutual recognition of qualifications and also transnational education in the region. So understand how, if and how they can impact each other or not. So basically we wanted to study the following, understand a little bit how is the international engagement in higher education between countries in Latin America, and we specified to be Brazil, Mexico, and Peru for that study, and the UK. Understand a little bit how it's the international higher education landscape in these countries. Understand a little bit the transnational education partnerships, if there are any frameworks, regulatory frameworks we should be aware of. Understand the MRQ agreements that exist in the region. Understand the perspective for other countries, the potential advantages of that. And finally, understand what would be the potential benefits or challenges for T&E in the region. So those were kind of some initial questions we had, initial doubts we had to research. And in the next slide, we'll talk a little bit, the next one, please, about the methodology that was used. So basically, we designed this study. It was conducted from end of last year until basically last month. So this is fresh research that we are still getting some findings. But basically, it started with a desk research on regulatory international higher education for these three countries and primary data research. So there were interviews with all the participants from those three countries. We looked at people in higher education system, from government, agencies, and also higher education institutions in these countries to conduct interviews. And we also looked at online surveys that were sent to 77 participants. The idea was to understand a little bit from also the same players, but with a broad scope, their views on T&E, on MRQ, and understand more or less the situation. So we had 37 respondents in Brazil, 36 for Mexico, and for Peru. Peru had a little bit of a lower rate response. The next slide, please. And the research findings for those were a little bit conductive to, they matched a little bit what we were expecting. So we saw that dual degrees, they are the most common if you look at transnational education of this kind of partnerships. We saw that, for instance, Brazil, the key partner for Brazil in this area was France, as we were expecting, and that most partnerships with T&E were looking at doctorate, at PhD. And for Mexico, for instance, we saw that it was Spain, and that they were looking most often at undergraduate degrees, which was a bit of surprise. And as you can see here from the different perspectives, dual degrees is followed close by online delivery. We are expecting that this will change with time. We've seen that change a lot during the pandemic in terms of people embracing more the online as an option for international partnerships in the context of restricted traveling. And this is something that potentially could come back as it's a cheaper model. And we saw that joint degrees comes third with 30% of the partnerships. Going next, please. In terms of other findings, they saw that international student mobility, it has been relatively little mobility in terms of UK, Latin American students in the UK percentually. That doesn't mean it's, in terms of numbers, it would be still a considerable number. But in terms of the overall student population in the UK from other countries, it represents around 1% of students. But on the other side, the international research collaboration is very strong. So what we see is that even though when you look at the overall number of students, it's not a huge contingent, there is an active research collaboration that's very fruitful. We saw that, for instance, the UK is top partner for those three countries. It's top 4 for all of them. We know, for instance, for Brazil, it normally varies between top 2, top 3 in terms of key research partner. So we saw that the partnerships that occur between UK and the countries in the region is very high level in a context in a very important in terms of research. And this is a very interesting that shows the importance that the countries have for the UK and vice versa. In terms of transnational education, we saw that, as expected, it is still a little bit limited. We saw that most TNE delivery from the UK in the region is distance learning and aligned education. So around 100% for the UK and most for Brazil, 84% for Brazil and 50% for Mexico. So what we can see is that there's still scope for transnational education for further partnerships with the UK and universities in the region in terms of presential face-to-face delivery. Going to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the kind of priorities for institutions. This came from the institutions in the region, what they were looking at. And as you can see here, we still see a very important predominance of studying abroad and student exchange as a priority, but international research collaboration is a close second. And we can see that especially for Brazil and Mexico, and that pretty much matches the overall scenario where what institutions are looking for when they think about partnering with the UK. Other international partnerships, internationalization at home, come strongly for some countries, especially for Brazil. Development of dual degrees, and as you can see here, also a upcoming trend on international student recruitment, which shows that these countries, especially for Brazil, and we're starting to see that as well strongly in Mexico, countries are interested in also receiving UK students, which opens doors for discussion outward mobility in the UK or dual schemes of mobility for the UK when looking at these countries. Going to the next slide, we're gonna see a little bit more about those priorities. So as you can see here, about the sequence of priorities, and we can see that there are some specifics. For instance, in Brazil, we see that both TNE and internationalization at home are very equally prioritized. The institutions are looking at both, and that's a positive sign and actually reflects a lot. It shows a lot of the work we also have been doing in the country with these agendas. So it shows that what we've been addressing is actually something that's very top of mind for institutions, which is really good. And we saw that 60% of the institutions, they're also very much looking forward for international student recruitment, which also matches with the idea of internationalization at home. And we see that Mexico and Peru, on the other hand, don't see international student recruitment as such a top priority, which shows that Brazil is on a slightly different level in terms of how the institutions in the country are seeing the perspective of internationalization and its benefits for them. On the next slide, please. On terms of other research findings we discussed, as I mentioned, we wanted to understand what would be the value of TNE for the region. We did a global research that British Council launched late last year about value of TNE, and we look broadly at different regions. And what we can see is for some regions, the value of TNE will linked with more access to higher education, for others linked with gender access to higher education, and we wanted to understand, looking at a deeper level for the region, for those countries, what would be potential benefits, what would be the added value of TNE. And what we could see is that TNE partnerships is considered as an important way for institutions to achieve more internationalized status. They want this to be a way, a route for them to be more internationalized and to increase their quality. So TNE needs to be deeply linked with quality for the countries, for the institutions in these countries, in terms of making sure that we are bringing some things that will be outstanding and that will help the overall system up in quality. Additional benefits talked about socioeconomic development of region and local communities. So thinking about TNE, it's important in terms of providing courses that don't necessarily exist in some of the regions in those countries, allowing for people who would not be able to go abroad necessarily because of funds, or institutions that would not be able to fund students to go abroad because of costs. It would allow them to still provide international experience to their students, to still allow them to access international networks, which is really important. They also looked at having those links and capacity building that would bring benefits to the local market. So the idea is that instead of sending someone abroad, you bring the knowledge and you bring those links and these capacities and benefit the local community. It was something that came up very strongly. And the idea that you can keep talent at home. So the idea that instead of they going abroad and maybe not coming back, you are able to capacitate your student in the country and keep the person here so the person can develop the career in the region where they graduated or to the postdoc. On the next slide, please. So we also discuss, in addition to the value, what would be potential benefits, what they would see as challenges for having more TNE. And not surprisingly, regulatory came up very strongly in terms of regulatory gaps that make the challenge, that make this a little bit more challenging, that makes that institutions need to go through more bureaucratic steps to ensure the partnership. The cost of TNE, this came up strongly also because some universities in Brazil, they don't charge tuition fees, public universities, but universities abroad, especially in the UK, they do. So this difference in how they see students and how to achieve an agreement in terms of costs came up. English language is a key challenge as well for the region. We have low levels of fluency, English fluency in all three countries. In Brazil, for instance, I think the latest research put Brazil at 5% of English speakers, more or less. So this is a significant challenge. But at the same time, it's important to notice that normally the universities that are willing and interested in TNE, they also prepare the internationalization at home and English programs that will support the students. So what we see from the English languages barrier is that this needs to be tackled by the institutions as an all-over solution in terms of how they internationalize. The institutional capacity came up also, and that's about limited staff, staff turnover, not necessarily having the structures internally to be able to secure that, staff training, and the lack of knowledge as well, and the lack of not necessarily having so much information about TNE, and not necessarily having everyone capacitated on it. And looking at those, of course, British Council's organization, there are many we cannot fully address, but they also consider these research findings when drafting the call to ensure that what we are trying to support with the call will also help institutions within the realm that we have. And for the next slide, please. So we also have a little bit of recommendation for policymakers, understanding that this is something that needs to be developed government to government, and for us, and something that we as British Council and the higher education institutions, the higher education system, we can support with our technical knowledge and providing some support as well in terms of content. But for us, one of the key things based on the research is the need that was felt by all people interviewed on terms of having a shared understanding of TNE activities and value. So making sure that anything that's developed is actually mutually benefit, so that we have bilateral and multilateral incentives that can make this something that can be sustainable long term. Leverage existing networks, and that's something that's very good because we see that especially Brazil, Mexico, they have strong networks with the UK. So how we leverage those existing research networks into TNE, understanding whether MRQ effectiveness, we have MRQ's agreement signed between Peru and UK and Mexico and the UK. So understanding how these MRQs that already exist, they could be maybe affecting the sense of supporting more TNE or supporting the structuring of a TNE understanding. And in the case of Brazil, understanding how we could, government to government, make sure that the recognition of degrees is facilitated or more speedily done. And understanding that's very important to promote collaboration between agencies and higher education institutions to develop TNE guidelines so that countries know exactly what they expect to achieve out of TNE and what are the basic roles for TNE in those countries. And I think for the next slide, okay. And in terms of higher education institutions, we understand that they are very interested in international collaborations, but not necessarily we have a full understanding of TNE. So for us, the recommendations in that sense are that we spread a little bit understanding on TNE, understanding a little bit the modalities, how it works, and to understand how internationalization strategies that are being developed by the higher education institutions, how they can bring a TNE component when it makes sense, and how TNE can be part of a medium to long-term strategy for the institution. Build institution-wide support for TNE. So as we, from our work with Internationalisation at home and working with Brazilian universities in previous calls and UK universities, we saw that when they were discussing about internationalization in the long term, or especially internationalization at home, it was not one department or an area, or even just that part of internationalization. It was about how the whole institution is prepared for this and how this becomes part of the overall strategy for the institution going forward. And it's the same thing for TNE, how this would be part of the institution as long as it's aligned with the key strategic objectives of the institution. And of course, develop and share know-how. So understanding, sharing best practices, sharing cases between institutions in the same countries, but also understanding from examples abroad on how this can be improved. And I think the next slide, please, we will talk about UK stakeholders. So understanding how the UK sector can also participate in this. So there are some possibilities. We talked about having more collaborative efforts, government to government. So understanding how UK stakeholders can join these dialogues. British Council is here also to support these conversations. We work very closely with the UK government, the Department for Business and Trade, and the FCDO in these countries to support UK stakeholders, so understanding how we can think about this in a sector perspective and support these conversations. UK stakeholders more individually, if they consider local language in TNE provision, as we discussed, it is important that local institutions think about internationalization, also think about language, not necessarily English, but the languages that we need for internationalization. But it's also good to see this coming from the UK partner, how this can be adapted, how any TNE course that's developed can consider local conditions and can consider as well how to be mutually beneficial in the sense of content that can also be brought, etc. And also thinking about online platforms for student mobility and interinstitutional collaboration. So this would be some of the recommendations we have at this point. And I think it's a good timing because we drafted the call thinking a lot about these research recommendations and thinking how we can support with our institutional mandate for more partnerships within UK and institutions in Latin America. So I think that's it for me today. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And over to you, Diana. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera, for this very insightful presentation of our research findings and key recommendations. We're excited to provide detailed insights into the partnership and the call. And this is, of course, your opportunity to learn about the possibilities that await through T&E partnership, the specific areas of study this call aims to support, and also the eligibility criteria, the application processes, and important deadlines. Before we go into that, let me provide you with a bit of context of where we're at and what has taken us to design what we see as the next step of a process in supporting internationalization and T&E. Yeah, next one. So telling a bit of our story, Vera reflected and shared a bit of the key research and the key findings that has taken us to design the kind of call and to promote the collaboration spaces that we are aiming to have as a result of this particular opportunity. We do have a history, and it was very exciting to see how the key areas that we've been supporting at the policy level, at the capacity building level, being it nationwide or institutional or even individual, it's reflected in the kind of recommendations and the kind of key areas that would need to be supported in order to have more impactful partnerships and more impactful collaboration. So, talking about our focus on our key areas, there is a set of research here, the internationalization, Universities for the World publications reflect the kind of process and the kind of findings that we've mapped, particularly in Brazil. So we're talking about a first edition on this particular aim of strengthening areas of interest for policy and higher education institutions, which at the time were driven by mobility, as it's still a key motivation in Brazil, but also the internationalization at home a priority. And based on that, and thinking of the internationalization program policies launched at that time, we started understanding and supporting how to support higher education institutions in the design of those internationalization plans. So an important element of us here is understanding that all institutions are not in the same stages of internationalizations, and while some are more advanced, some still need some room to develop that vision and the plan and the actual roadmap taking them to that specific vision, and seeing the value of collaboration in that. So UK universities and Brazilian universities exchanging vision, exchanging purpose, and drawing an internationalization plan that would enable them to submit their plans for print capacities at the time. And with that, we moved on, and I'm zooming into the last 4 or 5 years of the program, into improving those internationalization capacities. So Vera just outlined the kind of capacities that are needed in terms of knowledge, in terms of regulation, in terms of sub-specific aspects, being it an international curricula, being it language policies, being it the use of language as a tool for internationalization. And as a result of that identification of that need and that opportunity, there was a specific call framing English language applied research, thinking of language policies and the importance of understanding language as a key area for internationalization. And then strategically, there was a space for most internationalized universities to welcome in their networks. And that's the key element that Vera also brought, leveraging networks. It's an important strategy of the work that we do. We believe in the value of networks, and we believe in the growth and the way that we can amplify the impacts via partnerships and networks. And bringing this more matured partnerships and thinking of these more matured partnerships and internationalization, there was a key question on how do we effectively implement the internationalization plans? How do we quality assure them? So let's zoom into this, and let's bring also our partners in UK agencies, QAA, etc., to start advising and to start sharing best practice and learning from local policies as well, being here with the Ministry of Education, with CAPES, in understanding the kind of policies and the kind of support that it's required to follow up in the effective implementation and quality assurance of internationalization. And thinking always of going beyond mobility, understanding that mobility is a key driver for internationalization amongst institutions in the region and in the UK. But the power it has goes beyond mobility and goes into the impact of research collaboration, goes into international collaboration in a bilateral sense as a whole, goes into fostering regional development, if we're thinking of TNE, zooming more specifically and understanding key priorities on specific area generation social development history. We have been prioritizing always based on insights and research, and always working with a partnership approach, linking UK and higher and Brazilian universities, and working with other countries across the region, of course. And then most recently, we have emphasized the gender and the diversity angle into everything that we do. That's a value of the British Council, and that it's also a need, an opportunity, and a context-driven decision in the higher education ecosystem. So inspired by different kind of frameworks and by different charters and principles, and the Athena Swan, it's one of them. Our reflection across the Women in Science program has always been to work with higher education institutions and with the higher education ecosystem as a whole, policy and research supporting agencies, in making more diverse higher education institutions that support the development of gender and diversity more broadly, and that link this opportunity into the actual influence and the richness of diversity and equality for research, for influence, for policy, for teaching, and for mobility. All this to enable processes, to understanding how we can enable those processes towards achieving gender equality in science, building capacity within Brazilian education, which is within Brazilian higher education institutions through partnerships, and ultimately getting the dialogue and the tools rolling in order to monitor, to make ourselves accountable, and to have the instruments to actually advance in the gender agenda. This is a particular call, a particular set of calls. I'm talking about 3 calls where we partnered, again, UK and Brazilian institutions, in thinking how to make these frameworks context specific, how to learn, but how to share practice and how to grow together, and ultimately opening a door to start discussing internationalization based on values, based on quality, based on research, based on the whole complexity and holistic approach of higher education institutions, with a gender and diversity component cross-cutting. This is the Brazilian Gender Equality Framework. It's the first publication, and it's the first guide that we're having in the country, and we continue working with UK institutions. Some of you present today are partners of this scheme. Others would be partnered with all our internationalization interventions, and as a result, we can see in the map key engagement from both UK and Brazilian institutions across this agenda. So we are happy to celebrate 42 UK BR partnerships, over 80 higher education institutions engaged, being in the form of participating in the dissemination of this knowledge, becoming aware. So as I said, institutions are in different levels of internationalization and different levels of capacities to start implementing the different tools. I might say that the 42 UK partnerships are a bit more advanced in that sense. And then this 84, it's our strategy to start get the ball rolling for it to be the talk of the town and to actually gear up those opportunities. At the policy level, we are working actively with the Ministry of Education to kickstart an internationalization working group where we are expecting to influence and to channel and to contribute to areas around regulation, policy, insights, and bridge, be a voice and be a channel to make this as enabling and as supportive as and impactful as possible. And then just a quick reminder that we, on the gender agenda, also have a wider global program. Brazil is part of these countries, our Women in STEM scholarships. So a bit zooming into the call. Why are we launching this call, and a bit of the history just to share the expectation of having applications that will lead us to consolidate these T&E partnerships with a gender-sensitive agenda. So that's going to be a bit of the heart of the call. It's the consolidation of these T&E partnerships. We've been walking the road with several institutions since the design of internationalization plans, and we know we've been supporting and following up on conversations, maturing those relationships, those networks, those partnerships between institutions, and now we're hoping to get from you applications that will make formal those agreements that will reflect in the consolidation of specific T&E outputs and outcomes. And we expect this to have a gender-sensitive approach, as this is part of the work we've already been working with all of you being on the UK, Mexican, or Brazilian side. So hopefully this opportunity would be exciting. We see it as a bit of a final push or set of pushes to be able to respond to that support or that kind of capacity, that kind of funding that you need to formalize the kind of processes that have been ongoing for the last years. So thank you very much, and I'm going to pass this over to Marcela to provide details of the call, eligibility timelines, and the different arrangements that we expect to receive. Thank you.
and sustain it. This is focused on partnerships between UK institutions and partner institutions from either Brazil and Mexico. So in here, when we talk about eligible UK institutions, we are talking about UK higher education institutions that are not-for-profit ones. And the partner institutions in either Brazil and UK also are expected to be higher education institutions. The proposals should be designed by the lead applicant in the UK with the support of the Brazilian and or Mexican partners. So we expect this to be a partnership, a co-creation of the proposal, but this needs to be submitted by the UK lead institution. I'm going to go through the details of the application when we come to that specific slide. So what do we expect for the support and for this call itself? The partnership building for the identification of shared UK and TNE priorities in areas or fields of internationalization. As mentioned by Gianna previously, we have got history of this in Brazil. We certainly do have that in Mexico as well, and the UK has long-standing relation with countries in the Americas. We also expect partnership consolidation for the delivery of mutual TNE plans, joint or dual degrees, or specific activities or programs focused on internationalization. The partnership format for this specific call differs somewhat from what we have seen in previous calls. So as Diana said, and as I could navigate a bit for the participant list, some of you in here have been or are currently engaged in calls of ours. This time we have differentiation because we are engaging with two countries and the UK. So we have the option of bilateral engagement, which includes one UK institution and one Brazilian, or one UK and one Mexican. Or trilateral arrangements, which can have multiple formats. One of them includes one UK lead institutions and two Brazilian ones, or one UK institution plus two Mexicans, or a multi-country one with one institution from each of the three participating countries. So this is all very clearly explained in the terms of reference, but just going through again, bilateral within one country and the UK, and trilateral including two of the specific American countries and the UK, or a three-way alliance and partnership including all three countries. This is something that's totally up to the institutions to decide, and that are different kinds of financial supports allowed for different kinds of partnerships. So how is the funding going to work? This call is going to fund up to 8 projects in total for a 12-month period. So this call is going to fund projects for a 1-year long development, starting from November this year for those that are selected. The partnership format that I have just explained is going to fund projects through these amounts. So if you choose to be a bilateral arrangement, saying in here, one Brazilian institution, one UK, you can apply for a maximum of £20,000 funding. If you are a trilateral with one partner from each country, one Brazilian, one Mexican, one UK, up to 30,000. If it is a trilateral with two partners from either Brazil or Mexico, you can apply for up to 25. So we see there is this differentiation of the amount of grant funding you can apply depending on the number of institutions and the complexity of the arrangement between the countries participating that is also involved. So bear this in mind when you write your application and when you consider the budgeting for the activities that you are planning. The key dates that you need to consider, this is also very clearly explained in the website and also in the terms of reference. As Diana mentioned, the deadline for applications is the 15th of September, and we are going to have the selections happening between that date and the 29th, date by which the selected institutions are going to be notified by our teams through email of the results. From there onwards, we are going to be signing the contracts with the selected institutions, and allocating of funding is going to happen until the end of the month of October. Project starts on the 1st of November, going through the next 12 months, ending on the 1st of November 2024. But then how does it work with the application? We are setting the dates, but how do you actually apply? We mentioned that to apply, you need to co-create with your partners from either Brazil, Mexico, and the UK lead institution. All the steps are clearly explained in the terms of reference. Everything is settled in there. So you are going to need to fill out an application form and submit a list of documents through email to our colleague. But let's take it from the start. What you're going to have to do. You are going to have to collect documents from the institution to ensure that you have got the authorization from within to proceed with this application. So we need institutional letters from all partners from all partner institutions in Brazil, in Mexico, and the UK. We are going to need CVs from all members of the team who are applying. You're going to need to fill out the application form, the budget, and all other annexes that are listed in here. That are listed here in the terms of reference. So remember, every single member of the partnership, meaning the UK lead higher education institution and the Brazilian and or Mexico higher education institutions, must provide the confirmation letter, support letter signed by the assigned member of your higher education institution, the CVs, the application form that is properly filled, and all other supporting documents such as the budget, and these need to be sent by email to our colleague Liz de Espinosa. Her email is listed there on the website by 11:59 p.m. on the 15th of September. All right, so please bear that in mind. Pay attention to the deadlines, pay attention to the application details, and if you have any questions, do contact Liz or do reach out to us and we can redirect that to her if you have any need for support. All right, I believe that this is the key information I needed to share with you. And I now do hand over to Diana and open the floor to you all for the questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcela. We hope this brief contextualization has been insightful and helpful for potential applicants. Now it's the time to open the floor for your questions. We're ready to hear from you. Please feel free to share your queries using the chat or the Q&A feature, and we'll address your questions in real time. Do we have we have the questions being sent to us? So I'm wondering if we already have some of them here in the chat. Let me look into this.
Well,
we
You can go ahead and I'll do it.
We did receive a question from Andrew Macrae. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. He asked, what does COIL stand for? And Vera gently and kindly already answered that, saying that it stands for Collaborative Online International Learning Platforms. This regards something that was mentioned throughout her explanation of the TNE part. Now we have a question here from Karen asking if we have examples of the specific projects that have been funded previously.
Yes, Karen, we have several. We have those 42. We would need to reflect on the kind of project and which one you're thinking of in terms of the relevance. But I will maybe provide as an example initial projects we funded, but that might take us into expecting the kind of projects that we are expecting via the call. For example, the joint development of an international curriculum. I'm not going to mention the partner institutions, but it was a bilateral proposal between UK and Brazil. And it had further engagement from other Brazilian institutions in the form of network. But it was basically tracing a plan between both institutions to design and advance on a concrete output to develop an international curriculum that was to be applied institutionally. Other projects that we funded most recently were around the quality assurance and the implementation of the internationalization plans, and the formula is always the same. We have institutions from the UK and from Brazil thinking, working together. This kind of collaboration usually includes workshops between the institution. It usually includes, and that we will also be expecting from this particular call, high-level engagement at the institutional level, so vice chancellors or pro-vice chancellors of international relations and or research supporting this kind of collaboration. And we have several examples of calls of institutions working together on the internationalization and the T&E agenda. So particularly, they will have a set timeline of meetings where they would be discussing specific elements of the T&E or internationalization agendas. They would work towards getting their teams together in designing a kind of output. We've come across some very interesting results of the funding calls, which were not the primary expected result at the moment. But for example, some research hubs, and not going beyond the research collaboration itself, and planting the seed for international institutional spaces that will allow further internationalization and T&E output. So ideally, as was presented by Marcela on the expected outcomes, in the form of dual degrees, or in the form of some program, online program, etc. So we do have several examples. If in our website as well, you can see the history and the different institutions awarded. And again, as part of that history, we expect to see that process evolving into maturing and supporting the formalization and the formal development of T&E and internationalization outputs.
Thank you, Gemma. Sylvia mentioned that they could not see a list. Sylvia, I posted here on the chat which list exactly you would like to see. If you could just comment, I will be able to.
I think the list of eligibility. That's in the site, but yeah, that question came when you were talking about eligibility and what was listed. So that's in the website. Yeah. That's in the eligibility criteria of the website. The call, the PDF of the call, it's all listed there. The fact that the UK, it's the lead applicant, and the different arrangements and the different requirements and documents that need to be submitted by the deadline.
Thank you so much, Gemma, for clarifying that. I will be posting the link shortly, but in the meantime, let's address the two other questions we've got here. Luciana Gonçalves asks if any UK university is eligible, and the answer is that yes, as long as they are recognized as an educational body in the UK, as regularly recognized by the government and the responsible bodies. So yes, if they are a not-for-profit under the eligibility terms of this call, you can partner with them if you are in Brazil, or if you are a member of a UK institution, then you are eligible to participate. Andrew has another question. He thanks us for the presentation. We are very happy to have you here. And he asks, which UK institutions are currently involved? Do we have a UK institute looking to partner with Federal do Rio de Janeiro? If so, I am happy to help. Before the pandemic, a partnership between UFRJ and Durham has supported on a universal go-to-tell partnership? Well, currently we have 6 partnership projects going through with the Gender Equality Partnerships call, but these involve over 6 universities in the UK. They actually involve 15. There is a list on the website. I can post here the website as well for you to take a look. It's quite hard to keep track of all the names. Unfortunately, it's too much information for one to grasp. But we do have lots of institutions currently engaged, and we have many others who have been engaged throughout these over 80 that Diana mentioned. So there's definitely a lot of synergy happening. And we are happy to advertise any willingness of UK institutions who are looking for partners in Brazil, if that's the case, if you are, if you would like us to do that, right, Jen? I think we can always
I think, yeah, I think it's good. Thank you very much for the interest. So as Marcela said, we have several institutions, and it would be complicated to the cherry picking or the matchmaking. I think what we can definitely support, because we do need to also handle some level of impartiality in the whole process, but we can definitely share the resources of the existing institutions. There are several already working in the region, and particularly with that university, being them on the gender equality partnerships or previously as part of the internationalization call. You ask now, how can I help? I think it's that ownership of maybe start connecting with key leads inside your institution, and following up with the UK existing partner or any partner that you might be interested in engaging, and coming together with a joint proposal. So it's very much following up on that. It's on the local and UK institutions to support the development of those partnerships. But we're happy to share information of existing partnerships, and that you can find in our website. And we work with UK institutions, particularly UUKI, to disseminate this opportunity also for UK institutions to become aware. So I think feel free to reach out, to map, to identify the most relevant partner in order to advance with this processes and take advantage of this opportunity.
And just to add on this, I think it's important that we emphasize that what we want for this project, there is no set of UK partners. It's open for our institutions in the UK, provided that they're not for profit, etc. It's important that, and one of the key factors we'll look when choosing the proposals, that the institutions, they have a history together, they have collaborated before. This is because we know from previous projects that when it's a first time collaboration, it's always very challenging. And we know that previously we funded projects that were more broad in internationalization or for gender. This is the first time we are funding specifically for transnational education. And we understand that we don't expect the institutions to already have transnational education conversations, but we would hope they already have links, research networks, some sort of collaboration previously that will help them understand exactly what are the mutual needs. And as Diana and Marcela said, it doesn't need to be one-on-one. The idea is that the UK institution is the one that will be applying, and that's very important because there needs to be a full alignment. But it could be with one or more Brazilian institutions. We allow for different kind of arrangements. But it's extremely important that the Brazilian institution also has the buy-in from the Vice Chancellor, Pro Vice Chancellor, because this needs to be something that's supported institutionally, because it relies a lot in terms of capacity building and building up of future plans for transnational education. So I think that in the case of Rio de Janeiro, when you mentioned Durham as a previous partner, that would be something very interesting for you to look not only at them, but all the UK institutions that you have partnered with previously that could be interesting in this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vera. They're following up on that intervention. There is a comment asking if institutions should actively follow the partners and follow the partnerships to the partners to engage. And yes, that is the case. It's on the institutions to continue with that engagement, to build on that engagement, to reach out for any additional institution that they'd like to engage. But yeah, it's on institutions to build on that. And as Vera just said, and I think it's a very important that we highlight it, we are thinking of, we are hoping to receive applications from relationships and that are already very mature and that have been working collaboratively in different fronts, so that this funding support is an additional level to contribute to that preparedness and to that readiness to deliver T&E and advanced internationalization partnerships.
Thank you. Let's see, I've got other questions. We've got one from for research project already going on using physical techniques to study environmental questions, is it okay to participate in this call?
Can you please say
Sure.
that question again?
Yes, I will. For a research project already going on using physical techniques to study environmental questions, is it okay to participate in this call? I think the focus here is the fact that it's a research project.
Yeah, I think that the short answer is that we are not funding research collaboration via this call. We've supported some research collaboration before, but this is not in the heart of the scheme. In the heart of the scheme, it's T&E partnerships and institutional internationalization. So it goes beyond a specific research project. So I don't think from what you are mentioning, this would not be the focus of this call, I'm afraid. And then building on another question, should the project be focused on academic opportunities rather than community development to strengthen the academic opportunities for the population? Specific focus on gender equality. Again, I think we need to bring back the focus of the call rather than academic and community development opportunities. This is about T&E outputs and institutional internationalization opportunities. So Marcela shared a slide with the kind of expected outputs out of the call. And I think if you'd like to share it, I think it's a good moment to back and define the scope of the call. So it wouldn't be, if it were to be in the academic, as it's said there, it would have to consider a shape, for example, of dual degree T&E, dual degree online and distance learning, for example. If from both of the examples you said, they might be applicable from a very general perspective, but we're talking about I think it's the next one. We're talking about very specific forms of academic contribution in the form of T&E and in the form of internationalization. So partnership consolidation for the delivery of T&E plan, joint dual degrees or specific activities or programs for internationalization. Partnerships building on the identification of UK T&E shared priorities with partner countries and key fields for internationalization. So these are only some examples, but I shared, for example, a hub and how that is linked into specific T&E definitions. So thank you for all your questions. It's good to have the call very clear on its scope.
Thank you for this. Let's see what other ones.
Because I think Andrew, he puts here about Federal do Rio de Janeiro, and for the others here, I think this is exactly the kind of project we would hope to receive proposals for, because this is the kind of things that we would like to see, how more partnerships that will look at improving online learning with, dual degrees online, or other kinds of partnership in TNE would work. So we highly incentivize that you look at potential partners that would also be looking at it, and that doesn't stop. One UK institution can partner with more than one Brazilian institution. For instance, if you speak with a UK partner and they say they are considering partnering with someone else in Brazil or even in Mexico, it could work depending on the arrangement as part of the call. So we highly incentivize that you look at this type of partnerships. It would be really interesting to see what can come up.
Thank you, Vera. We have got Ricardo Alencar has got their hand up. Ricardo, if you would like to ask a question, please feel free to do so.
Or post it in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, they said,
Okay.
sorry, I didn't mean to. Okay, no problem. Thank you. So, well, there are no other questions or comments here in the chat at the moment. No open questions here in the Q&A.
Okay. So if we don't have any further questions, we'll start wrapping up a bit of our key reflections around it. But if some of these questions pop up after careful reflection of the content, it has been quite a lot, please contact the email. We will be posting this on the chat, lisdespinosa@britishcouncil.org, if any of those questions pop. You can also review this webinar. As I said, it will remain in our YouTube channel, the British Council of Americas. And I'll now hand over to Vera for final words on this session.
Thank you so much, dear Marcela, and all the team that helped us put the session together. And thank you for everyone who attended this session. For us, this was really important. As we mentioned, this is a pilot. It's the first time we are funding this kind of partnerships looking at TNE. So we are really excited to see the interest. We know other people who will be watching the session afterwards. It is being recorded, so we will be disseminating it. And as Diana mentioned, please have a review of the content, look at the website, the call, and to bring your questions. And please pay attention to the timeline to ensure that you're able to submit your proposal. So I think the session has been very interesting with the questions you brought and all the participation. And if we were to summarize a little bit the key points we covered, we discussed a little bit what's been happening in terms of transnational education in the region, the advantages of that in looking from the perspective of higher education institutions that are based in Brazil, in Mexico, and Peru. And we are also trying to see how this can be further stimulated. So we know there are different things that would need to be developed. There are regulatory items. There's something about disseminating the knowledge about transnational education, understanding a common ground in terms of language, so that language doesn't become a barrier, but rather an opportunity mutually. And for us, this call, it's a step towards making sure that TNE becomes something that's more common in the region. Of course, we are looking at TNE with the UK, but we understand that the benefits of a Brazilian institution preparing for TNE are systemic. We understand that it's all part of the same kind of strategy, thinking about internationalization, preparing for internationalization, and then understanding how TNE is a part of that and how it can benefit the organization itself in terms of preparing academic staff, administrative staff, but also the broader academic community. So we are really excited to have the chance to fund now these projects. We are looking forward to receiving loads of projects, and please bring your questions if you have any doubts. And I think that for us, it will be a very interesting thing for us later on to share the results of this and accompany the development of this project. So thank you all very much. And well, look forward to seeing you all sending proposals. Thank you. And have a great day, everyone.
before we conclude? Yeah, Marcel.
I think your internet's not working. Oh, you're back. Sorry.
Projects improve address students' social needs. Hello? I think we.
Yes, we can hear now about the question from Adriani. We cannot hear you. Are you back? I'm really sorry. I'm not sure if it's my internet or yours, Marcela.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we're back now. There was a little hiccup here. So back to Adriana's question, the project improving teachers' ability to address students' social needs, if it will be acceptable. Considering the focus on TNE, as long as there is a direct link between TNE and this scope, we can take it, of course. It's going to be more than welcome to see this anything linked to EDI as well. But otherwise, if it's something that is not connected to TNE, then it's not under the scope and under the focus of the scope. So I think that the key takeaway from this whole session is, can you link your project, your proposal, to the TNE focus and the scope of the scope and the items and the outcomes and outputs that are expected through what we have outlined while creating the scope. So as my goodbye, if I may say so, well, there has been another message. Okay, so it's Adriani thanking us. Thank you back for your interest and your calls and your comments. I would just like to remind you all to please make sure that you explore the call, the web page. We have posted this here in the comments. Make sure that you pin it in your favorites, and in case you happen to lose it, just go online and research the name of the call. You can add us, or you can add me on LinkedIn. I'll be posting there. Perhaps if you need any support in finding it, I'll be there to help you out. And look through all the resources you have on the website. Make sure you read it once, twice, 3 times. And if you have your questions, please write to ListDay within the timeline. Make sure you respect the timeline because this is final. And do participate. You will find more information on the website on the terms of reference. And if you still have questions and you feel like you would be more embraced by a face-to-face person, a face-to-face interaction, we are going to have a second session on the 28th. If you have colleagues that feel would be also interested in hearing more about this call, do share the links and the advertisements with them for the session we will be hosting on the 28th of August next week. And we are going to be sharing same information. It's going to be a different group of people, our colleagues from Mexico, and it's going to be in a different time zone. So please bear that in mind when sharing that with your colleagues, okay? This is going to be 3 hours earlier than today's session. This is very important to have in mind. So please feel free to share the links to the call, the links to the webinar, and go through the information. We really look forward to receiving your applications. We look forward to receiving your applications and your proposals by the.
Looking forward to hearing from you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.